What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 706. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, how was the 4th?
It was good. Had a good little barbecue. Had some folks over. It was a delicious time.
You let the children light off fireworks, I assume, unattended?
Yep, that's exactly what happened.
I mean, strangely, that is exactly what happened when I was a kid. I did a bunch. I would never allow my children to do that. I'll tell you, like what my parents allowed me to do with fireworks and stuff. I feel like we got away with a lot more than kids these days. Not necessarily all good either. No, I mean, there's a lot of talk about how kids are like over-parented now, right? Where like you need to let them have some freedom. They need to be, and that might be true. I don't know, but this is one of those things where that's not the case.
Yeah, the unintended fireworks don't fall into that category.
No. But speaking of fireworks, this show is going to be a real firecracker. We've got arena metagame shifts as we've seen the unbalanced nature of the format start to work its way through with the player base, as well as power plays, combos, cool stuff like that for Lord of the Rings draft. Before we get into that, we want to thank our patrons over at Patreon. That's the way to support the show. It's direct support of the show. Currently we don't have an advertiser right now or anything like that. We haven't for a little while. We're looking. We've got some talks going and we're working on some stuff, but as you might imagine, we're being very scrupulous about that and just making sure that everything is the way that we want it to be. And so for now, no ads, but you can support us via the Patreon if you like what we do here on the show. And we really do appreciate it. It's patreon.com/limited resources. As one of the many little benefits and perks that you get for being a patron, you get to put questions in for the Patreon question of the week. This one comes from Jonathan, who says, Marshall and LSV love the podcast. Thanks, Jonathan. It definitely helped me level up my drafting, deck building, and card evaluation, though I tend to love playing Grixis colors too much, even if they aren't open. Well, you came to the right place for that. But I'm realizing that I'm hot garbage at gameplay. Any general tips on processes for improving in-game decisions, or maybe an old LR episode you can recommend on the topic? Thank you.
We have talked about this on old shows. I'd have to look closer to figure out which one that would be. Though it's kind of hard, like in podcast format, to like go through that. That's actually where I'd recommend streams or videos, and I do plenty of both of those. One of the things I strive for is to talk through all the decisions I'm making and why. And back when Ben S used to stream, he was actually a really good person for that as well.
Definitely.
Where you would end up in a spot where he can really explain what he's doing and exactly why. As far as advice we can give you, I think that part of it is always know what it is you're trying to accomplish. I think it's okay to make mistakes. Everyone does. I have a lot more tolerance, I guess, or understanding of making mistakes when you're trying to execute a plan than not having a plan and just making plays. I was actually just talking to Marshall before the show kicked off about my Arena Open runs, and I streamed my day one, about 5 of those runs. And I actually was in that mindset where I wasn't making good plays. I was just kind of casting my cards and doing things. And I was losing. I actually ended up making day 2 of the Open by playing a 6 run after I ended the stream just by myself, just kind of thinking, Because when you're playing towards a goal, it's okay to make mistakes in furtherance of that. And I think that's like completely understandable. When you're just making plays, you're not going to get better. You're not going to improve. Your chances are not going to go up. So that's something that I think you really want to be aware of. Try to figure out what your goal is in every game with every deck. Work towards that. And the plays, it takes practice. It takes watching other players. It takes getting feedback from friends. All those things can help. But really, a lot of it, what it's about is just what are you trying to accomplish? Trying to figure out what it is you're trying to accomplish and how you can get there.
Right. That's really the key, is to not beat yourself up if you make a mistake with the correct intention, or, you're trying to move your game plan in a certain direction. It's when you are directionless. It's a really good starting point, Jonathan. So start from that. One of the things that Luis brought to the podcast when he first came on and has really kind of beat that drum the whole time has been to have a plan. And, I think a good litmus test that you can give yourself is at any point during the course of the game, any point, if somebody came up and tapped you on the shoulder and said, "What's your plan?" Would you be able to answer the question? It doesn't have to be super detailed. It doesn't have to be 7 turns in advance. It doesn't have to have some decision tree attached to it that you can't, speak. It's, it could be something as simple as, well, right now I'm the aggressor and I'm going to look to try to finish this game as quickly as is reasonably possible. Where it might be, right now I'm behind and I'm going to try to maximize my short-term resources so that I can use all these other cards in my hand that I may not have a chance to actually deploy over the course of the game. And I'm willing to take short-term loss for long-term gain. Okay. So go ahead now, do things that actually make that work. Right. That's the type of thing that can give you a foundation from which to work. And then you can start to work out the strategic plays on a more individual basis after that. So good luck with it, Jonathan. I mean, he knew that he's asking a big question, right? That, hence the other, LR episodes type thing, right? This is not something that we can address in a few minutes on the Patreon question of the week, but that having a plan and being conscious of it is definitely the first step in a good direction. Okay, so there's that. Let's do a couple of crack-a-packs here, Luis. And again, these are really important crack-a-packs here early in the format because they let you know where Luis and I stand on the format and kind of what we're doing. Also, we're starting to roll off of that initial phase of experimentation and really trying to push boundaries and really have settled more into what works, what we like, what we're going to avoid. I feel like I have a much better grasp on the format as far as those things go. So I'm less likely to push boundaries and experiment unless it's something that just hasn't come up yet for me. Because one of the principles that I like to bring up during the set review sometimes, which is really, really relevant at this stage of the draft format where it's been out long enough so that we know what's going on, but it isn't necessarily in its complete final form, is somebody's going to have to beat me with that card theory, right? Because at this point, after having done as many drafts as I've done, if I haven't gotten beaten by a card I haven't tried yet, it's probably not a real thing. Not 100%, but we're getting there, right? Where I would now feel confident saying, hey, that weird card that I thought might be really good, but probably wasn't? I haven't seen it yet. Nobody's beat me with it. Nobody's talking about it. I haven't got a chance to play with it. It's very likely that it's just not going to be a thing for the format. So let's dive into the crack-a-pack here. First card out is Nasty End. This is kind of a pet card of yours, Luis.
I like this card more than the general populace, I believe. And looking at win rates, it's not one of the more successful commons, but I found that if you do the work, and this is where this is again one of those spots where I think the 17th lands data and my own experiences diverge a bit. I find that I like a Nasty End in a lot of my decks. If you do the actual work, then I think you can get a good return from it. I
do too. It is also a card that goes down in value in multiples. It's you kind of want 1 or 0, of these. But yeah, just the fact that ring bearers are often expendable creatures because you often will put it on your smallest thing that can poke through the bigger, real creatures, if you will. So it's a 1/1 token, a 1/1 army, something like that. And if you can throw that away and get 3 cards out of the deal for 2 mana, you are getting ahead. And those are replaceable creatures for sure. Next is Hithlane Knots. That's the 1 in a blue instant tap a creature, scry 1, draw card. We kind of thought this might be one of those pivot cards that kind of brought together multiple things with the scry, the extra drawing the card, the tapping the creature is sort of a general thing, but it hasn't really. This card is fringe playable at best.
Yeah, I don't pick this highly, but I do play it a little more often than this type of card usually makes the cut, just because when you've got Fiery Inscription, Gandalf Sanctions, multiple Pelargir Survivors in your deck, the card becomes appealing, but It's not a card you should prioritize. You basically get as many as you want to add to your deck every draft.
Yeah, it missed the mark on being sort of the jack of all trades, but it's still okay.
Well, I think that the main thing is the scry deck is not very good.
Yes.
If the scry deck was good, this card is good in the scry deck.
Yeah.
It's just you don't draft that deck very often because the deck's not one you should draft very often.
Yeah, because it's like a combat trick in that deck. Next is Eagles of the North. This is the plane cycler. So it's the 5 and a white for a 3/3 flying. And when it ETBs, all your creatures get +1/+0 on first strike. It's been good.
Yeah, I mean, all the land cyclers are good. Just like in the last set, they were all bad. They're all good in this set. This is actually, I think, one of the weakest in terms of actually casting it, because all the other ones kind of stand on their own when you cast them. This one does not. So just keep that in mind.
I put this one in off of Shadowfax because it checks power.
Oh, that's pretty sick.
Yeah. So I was like, wow, I can put a 6-drop in with this thing, and it's like making my combat a lot better.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I had not written. That sounds like a combo you could mention in a combo episode.
We might have to think about that. Dreadful as the Storm. What is this one? Oh, this one. Yeah. 2 and a blue instant. Target creature has base power and toughness 5/5, and the ring tempts you.
This card is underrated, I believe. It's a good card.
What?
Oh yeah, this card is better than it looks. So this
it doesn't even say draw a card on it.
Sometimes it's better. Getting ring tempted. So ring tempting is interesting. We talked at length about it last week, but to expand a little, I think one shortcut is if you have enough ring tempting cards, like we're talking are in the 7 range, ring tempting is getting close, surprisingly, to draw a card. Like where
really
getting to the second level and being able to do that is just so powerful.
It is.
That I think that you definitely end up in a spot where you're getting that much value. Like sometimes, when you get to level 2 and you put it on your Dunlin Crebain and you're just looting every turn, and then that even kicks you further up the ring, finds more stuff. Like it ends that particular instance of ring tempting was better than just to draw a card.
No, that's true. No, it is. And it continues throughout the game. It's not a one-time bonus. Like your ring tempt stays that high. Okay.
I mean, you do have to do work. Like I'm not saying it's free, but it is the sort of thing where you end up in a spot where you get to smooth out your draws and then find stuff that provides actual raw card advantage to make it so that the looting just becomes better and better.
It's also
card draw spell or whatever.
Right. It's strange because instant speed ring tempting is good in 2 of the levels and kind of doesn't really matter for the other 2 necessarily, or I guess it's good in 3. It depends on how things play out. It's a little weird though. The first one, it doesn't really care, especially because if you're making a creature 5/5. But then, getting to the second one, you actually don't want to do it like in combat, right? You'd prefer to have that ring tempt pre-combat so you can get the loot.
Yeah.
The third one matters and the fourth one could matter too. I mean, if you were on 3 and there are like no blocks and you have a 2/2.
This does a ton of extra
all of
damage.
a sudden you're doing, 5 or 6 extra damage that you wouldn't have gotten.
I'm not advocating to take this one here because this is, again, too early, but I have found this card has overperformed. What you need to play this card is part of the reason you don't get to play it that often is you need enough ring tempting that line of text is something you actively want. You also need enough creatures. And you won't always run into like a blue deck that has both the creature count and the ring tempting count to really make this a hit. Really good on armies, really good on Rohirrim Lancer, Pelargir Survivor. You just end up with all these little dorks where I think it's pretty good.
Okay.
So
I'll keep an eye on it. My experience is not, I've found it to be basically unplayable, but I kind of like, especially what you're talking about with like maybe red blue, the kind of deck that can just get huge chunks of damage in. Like this could definitely do that. And I mean, again, and this also fits the category of cards that we talk about all the time now, which are you read them, they seem totally fine, but it's hard to find room in decks. I mean, what would you say your average number of playables is at the end of 2 packs these days? Is it 21?
No, way
20?
less, I think. I think part of it is, and we're going to talk about this, is when we talk about like the metagame shift, is part of it has been harder to get the black and red cards.
What do you think that number, like for me, it is I would say it's between 20 to 21. Like that.
I think I probably end up with about 16 to 18 cards that I want to put in my deck and another 5 I could.
Okay. So 5 Ds and the rest are Cs or better. Yeah.
So it kind of depends on your definition of playable, but like if you're counting stuff like Lembas Bread or Hithlane Knots, I'll get to 20.
No, I'm not. I'm counting a little higher than that, but not much. But yeah, okay. At any rate, that's interesting. Next is Errand Rider of Gondor, which is 2 and a white for a 3/2. And when ATBs, you loot, but if you have a legendary creature, then you just get to.
You don't have to put the card back. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the card goes on the bottom instead of.
It does go on the bottom of library instead of graveyard, right? All right.
Which is worse generally because you'd like to be able to discard your Haunt of the Lost Marshes or what have you. Yeah, I guess this is the card I'd be taking right now. I would hope not to first pick this, but this is a decent card. It works pretty well in black-white. Works pretty well in blue-white. It's okay in red-white. I actually don't like. It's a human, so any human's playable in red-white. One of the reasons I don't prioritize it quite as much there is because it's not the best stats. 3 mana 3/2 is just okay in terms of like combat.
Yeah, that's true. Next is War Beast of Gorgoroth, which is the 4 and a red 5/4. And whenever it or another creature you control with power 4 or greater dies, you amass Orcs 2. This card's actually been, like, if we're talking underrated, I think this one is actually like slightly underrated. You know, when we did the set review, we said, look, this is a totally fine card, but it's a tough slot. You know, the 5 mana common slot is like a tough one to carve out a piece for cards like this, but this guy's actually okay. Like it's a 2-for-1 most of the time.
Yeah, no, I like the War Beast. I always played at this point. Like, yeah, I still maintain that we were pretty close in the sense that you just don't need to be first picking 5-drops because you'll end up with enough. Like, I like this card a little bit more than the Sirathon Gold Patrol, the 4/5, but they're close enough that I don't care which one I end up with at the end of the draft very much. But I do care if I don't have enough like 1 and 2 drops. So that's like the main difference for me.
Definitely. Ents Fury, unfortunately, just a casualty of green here. This is the 1 and a green sorcery fight spell, but I don't consider these cards. They're not even on my radar.
No.
Easterling Vanguard. This is the 1 and a black 2/1, and when it dies, you amass Orcs 1. Good 2-drop.
Good card. Yeah, you always play this card. I think that I would start with Easterling Vanguard over any of the other options here.
Like, I think so too.
It's a below average black common, which shows you how good the black commons are.
Yeah.
But it's like maybe right, or maybe it's just like right average, like right in the middle. But yeah, it's still the card I would take here.
Yeah, but average for black is like, it's above all the green cards. Last common is Soothing of Smeagol, which is 1 and a blue. For an instant, it returns a non-token creature to its owner's hand, and then the ring tempts you.
This is a good one. I like having this in my blue decks. It plays nicely with the ring. It gives you like a good proactive play when like there's a bunch of creatures out. It's not what you want to do in turn 2, but on like turn 6, this is going to be one of the better cards in your hand.
It is. It solves many annoying problems. The non-token part, though, really does limit its ceiling quite a bit. I would still be on Easterling Vanguard of the commons, though.
Yeah, same.
Kind of boring. Uncommons. First one, well, it's going to jump right over. It's Golem's Bite. That's the black instant. Creature gets -2/-2, and you can pay 3 and a black and exile it from your graveyard to have the ring tempt you at sorcery speed.
Great card.
Really good.
I think Golem's Bite is very strong. Just a good 1 mana spell that later in the game does like a relevant thing is exactly what you want. So
it is. I mean, in many cases it says kill target ring bearer because people often will put it on a small creature, which is really nice just to like shut down the looting and that kind of stuff. Next is Denethor, Ruling Steward. This is the 1 black white 2/4 legendary human noble. And it says at the beginning of your end step, if a creature died under your control this turn, you get a 1/1 human soldier token, and you can pay 2 mana to sacrifice another creature to have each opponent lose 1 life and you gain 1 life. This card's
big fan
of
Denethor. Yeah, it's just a really good value card for black-white. Does exactly what black-white's trying to do. I would take Golem's Bite over Denethor pick 1, pack 1, because it's just the classic monocolor versus gold color.
Yeah.
If I knew I was black-white, I mean, depending on the composition of the deck, Golem's Bite could certainly be worse than Denethor. Like, Denethor could be more valuable, but pick 1, pack 1, just take the monocolor card.
Yeah, this card goes really well late game, too, where if you can get your opponent down on life, like, you can just say, okay, I've got 8 mana, gonna drain you out. Like, that does happen. And Denethor, being a 2/4 for 3 mana, does a good job of prolonging the game as well by being a good blocker. Next uncommon is Dunedain Rangers, which is 3 and a green for a 4/4 human ranger, and it's got landfall. If you don't control a ring bearer, the ring tempts you.
This is a solid card, but it's a green
fine,
card, so you'd prefer not to put this one in your deck.
We did open another uncommon. It's a foil. It's Samwise the Stout-Hearted. This is the 1 and a white 2/1 with flash. He's a legendary halfling peasant. And when Samwise enters the battlefield, choose up to 1 target permanent card in your graveyard that was put there from the battlefield this turn, and you get it back to your hand. And on top of all that, the ring tempts you.
Yeah, this is, I think, comparable to the other 2 cards, Golem's Bite and Denethor, but a good tiebreaker is just take the black card over the white card to start with. Yeah. So that's where I would start here.
So you're still on Golem's Bite, but right ahead of Denethor.
Yeah, Golem's Bite ahead of Denethor. I actually think, would I take Denethor or Samwise? Pick one, pack one. That's interesting. I think Denethor is a little bit better. It's multicolor, but it's probably enough better. And also, black-white compared to a white card isn't really multicolor because I want to be black. It's not as committal.
It's spotting you where you want to be anyway.
Whereas black-white, when you're talking about taking a black card, is most definitely multicolor.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I would assume that Samwise would still be the responsible pick over Denethor just because of the openness. I mean,
yeah,
Samwise
is really good.
Samwise is good too. Our rare is Forge Anew. This is 2 and a white for an enchantment. When Forge Anew enters the battlefield, return target equipment card from your graveyard to the battlefild. Should I read the rest of this?
No, it's the funny thing is
we have a rule, right? If it references equipment, we're out.
Yeah,
we're gonna stick with our rule here. So yeah, Golem's Bite is the pick here, I think, and then. I'm just going to go with my gut. My ranking is Golem's Bite, Denethor, than Samwise, even though I would not be shocked if your win rate was higher if you took Samwise over Denethor, pack one, pick one. But I've really liked Denethor, and that color combo, haven't liked it quite as much, but at least it has black, I guess. But yeah, I would take Golem's Bite.
Yeah, I like it.
All right, let's do another crack-a-pack here. All right, our next one out. First card out is Battle Scarred Goblin. This is the 1 and a red 2/2. And whenever it becomes blocked, it deals 1 damage to each creature blocking it.
Totally playable. Yeah. Not a card I'm going to heavily prioritize, but definitely a fine card.
Yeah, it's all right. Another Hithlane Knots. Not going to take that. Here's Generous Ent. The best of the green cards, but still well below. We haven't really let you get on your soapbox about Shire Terrace yet.
It's really bad.
You hate it.
I have put it in decks, and I expect I'll continue to put it in decks because it's not like a 0, but when you're playing 3 or 4 colors, you can play it. But it's, when we first looked at it, we're like, well, compared to Evolving Wilds, it enters untapped, but then if you want to get the land, it costs you 1. Okay, that looks like there's a little trade-off there. It turns out it's like Evolving Wilds is great and this card's terrible. Evolving Wilds lets you spend the mana, in quotes, on turn 1 by just playing it as a turn 1 tap land. Shire Terrace takes up turn 2. It's like the comparison between the March of the Machine land cyclers and the 1-mana land cyclers in this set. And some of them are great and the others are not. And in this case, Shire Terrace is a card I would not play in a 2-color deck, and I would still even consider not playing in some 3-color decks depending on the mana.
Yeah, it's funny because it is a give and a take. Like if you draw, one problem with Evolving Wilds is you're like, come on, I need a land for my 6-drop, and then you draw Evolving Wilds. And this doesn't have that problem. You can still cast your 6 most of the time. The problem is the base use case is to activate the card, use it to go fix your mana and get your stuff. And that is always slower, always clunkier, always more difficult. So the thing that you really want to do is 100% of the time more difficult. And then it kind of washes with the other one where you get a tap land sometimes, this one you don't. But turn 1 Shire Terrace doesn't really do anything, right? It can't cast anything in the set. Exactly. So at any rate, I don't like it either. Smite the Deathless I do, though. That card has definitely lived up. It's really good.
Yeah, Smite the Deathless.
I nabbed what is it, the 5/3...
Oh, Witch King of Angmar? Yeah, that's the story beat, right? That's why that card was...
Is that what's getting killed?
Yeah, it was basically designed to do that.
Well, I did that. I did not realize that there was a flavor element, but I got to tell you, that's nasty. Like, come on. That's like probably their best card, and it just gets nabbed by like my common. Anyway, that card's great, and it would certainly be the pick here. Took Reaper. That's the 1 and a white 2/1. When it dies, the ring tempts you. I haven't really liked this one as much.
I think it's playable. It's a totally fine card. It's just not one I'm gonna, go far out of my way to get.
Yeah, I feel like I would rather just have like 1 and a white 2/1 human with no text or something in those decks. Next is Deceive the Messenger. Been playing a good amount of this. Yeah, I did find the upper limit. They do kind of run out of steam, but having a couple of these or one of these in your deck's really good. It's the blue instant that gives a creature -3/-0 until end of turn and then lets you amass Orcs 1.
I really like this card. This card has gone up my list of top blue commons. At the moment, I usually try to settle on having 2 in my deck, but I could definitely see you ending up with 3 in the right deck. Like if you have
4. Enough
spell stuff. 4 seems like it's pushing it a bit.
It was too many. Yeah, it has a nice impact on the game, but it is it's a surgical tool, right? Like you fire it off at just the right time and it can really devastate the opponent. It really can, by the way. I mean, think about it. Just if they attack with anything with 1 toughness that's 1, 2, or 3 power, you can just get it, right? And that feels really nasty, especially because Deceive the Messenger is not a high pick generally, right? I mean, this is a card you can pick up 5th or 6th or 7th, maybe even later. And, you can turn it into like a removal spell for something that could be pretty important.
Yeah.
Dunlin Crabane.
Yeah.
This card's so dope.
I would take Dunlin Crabane over Smite the Deathless here.
Yeah, I would too. That's the 2 and a white 1/1 flyer that amass Orcs for 2. It's been one of the best commons. It's tied stats wise with what's it called, but I don't know. I'm a huge fan. Next is Mushroom Watchdogs, another casualty of green. This card's totally fine, would be cool. It's the 1 and a green 2/2. You could sack a food to put a +1/+1 counter on it, give it vigilance at sorcery speed, but the food deck's terrible. Green is terrible. These are related. Let's move to uncommons. First is Gandalf, Friend of the Shire. This is the 3 and a blue flash 2/4 Gandalf, and you can cast sorceries at instant speed. And whenever the ring tempts you, if you choose a creature other than this Gandalf, then you draw a card.
Yeah, it's great. I would start with Gandalf over Dunlin Crabane. It just, if you can draft some good tempting cards alongside Gandalf, it's really easy to just kind of go off.
It really is. This is a type of card that you cannot let your opponent have. And on the battlefield, like, because it starts to get out of hand quickly. And the really cool part is that you can often engineer a 2-for-1 just by casting this with flash and blocking. And so you'll start off by like maybe eating a small token or even a 2/2 or 2/1 or something like that. And then you just have this card draw engine at the ready that your opponent really has to respect as well. That's a lot of value, for your 4 mana. I like Gandalf a lot. Next is Shadow Summoning. This is the white-black sorcery that gives you 2 tapped 1/1 flyers.
This is a really good card. I think it's comparable to Dunlin Crabane, maybe even a little bit better if you were already black-white, because it costs 2 mana and 2 1/1s. 2 1/1 flyers for 2, I think, is better than 3 mana for a 1/1 plus a 2/2, given that the 2/2 doesn't fly. But pick one, pack one. I wouldn't take a gold card for the same reasons. And I actually think Gandalf is still a better card to start with. When you draft around Gandalf, it just feels like you can really do some good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Crabane's better. I have Smite better. Like, I would rather have Smite. So this is a pretty stacked pack. Second to last uncommon, as it turns out, is Quick Beam Upstart Ent. Man, it's just a bummer that green is so bad because there's just a bunch of like decent cards here. This one's fine. It's 4 GG, 5, 6, and when it ETBs, you can give or another Tree Folk enters the battlefield in your control. You can give up to 2 target creatures +2/+2 and trample. It has a big effect on the game. I mean, I've been on the bad end of a Quick Beam Ent before, and it's like, okay, yeah, that's a lot. You can die from it. It's huge. It leaves a 5/6 behind. It has this static ability. It's a good card. It's just too green.
Yeah, it is a good card, and I have lost to it, and I anticipate losing to it again. But at double green. Like there's just no reason to put your draft down that path.
No. We did get another foil uncommon. This one is Flame of Anor. This is 1 blue-red for an instant. And it says, choose 1. If you control a wizard as you cast a spell, you may choose 2 instead. I don't think I've done that yet. Target player draws 2 cards, destroy target artifact. This is a rare, right?
That's a rare.
Yeah, thank you. Destroy target artifact and or Flame of Anor deals 5 damage to target creature.
So what's funny about this card is
there
are no wizards in Lord of the Rings except Gandalf and Saruman. Those are
really?
Wizards.
Are they the only ones? That's funny.
But I have cast double kicked flames off Gandalf before.
Okay,
it is a thing. Yeah, I would still just take Gandalf here. I feel like a really high power level build around. You already want to be taking ring cards because I think that mechanic is really powerful. Mm-hmm. So it's not like Gandalf's asking you to do something that you wouldn't want to do normally. And I don't know. I think I would still start with that over Dunlin Crebain, though I really couldn't argue too hard if you wanted to just take the Crebain.
Yeah, this is such a stacked pack. We haven't even got to our non-foil rare, although it's not very good. It's Sharky, Tyrant of the Shire. This is the 2 blue, black, 2/4 that takes away their lands, their non-mana lands.
Yeah, I'm not sure where this card is aimed because it's already so expensive that even in Constructed, I can't really think of how you could use this card.
Yeah, it's too late for the decks that it would matter. I did get my opponent with it. I put it in my deck. I misread it, by the way. This is before we did the set review or something, maybe after. I don't remember. But at any rate, I misread it.
You did the Rare and Mythic review slightly after you got a chance to play with the cards.
I might have played it before then or whatever. And I thought, oh, sweet, gold card and something about taking abilities. And then I'm like, wait, lands? And at any rate, but I actually got my opponent. They had the Shire, the one that makes food, and they were like leaning on it. And then they couldn't. And there was a very long pause. And they started going over my cards. And I'm like, it's that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like anyone ever plays that card too.
Yeah, but at any rate, exactly. That was the last time I played it, unfortunately. What a stacked pack, though. We have Gandalf here, Dunlin Crebain, Smite, Flame of Anor,
and Shadow Summoning. So really nice. So at the end of the day, though, you're on Gandalf and then Dunlin Crebain or then Flame? Like, what are your power rankings here? Gandalf, Crebain, Smite, Flame, Shadow Summoning.
Okay. Yeah. So you're definitely not putting Flame of Anor in that category of even though it's gold, I just need to go for this type deal. Yeah.
It's not so good that realistically, Flame is a 3-mana deal 5 most of the time.
It just kills something. You can get cards off it in the late game, but yeah. The Gandalf is definitely my pick as well, mainly because of the extremely high floor. Like just a 4-mana 2/4 flash is already pretty decent, and then it just has this insane upside. It would be followed by Crebain and Smite for me as well. Okay, so there's that. All right, so what should we talk about the we should talk about the metagame shifts first up, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think basically as people have drafted the set more and gotten more information as to like what is going on, you notice that black and red, like the secret's kind of out and people are drafting those at a more appropriate level. And then likewise, green is also getting drafted a little less. So like it's the combination of people are more likely to take the good colors and less likely to take the bad one has meant that it's a little harder to find the same decks like we used to, right? Like right in the beginning of the format, it felt like you could always end up with black and or red, sometimes both, 25 awesome playables, 5th pick Dunlin Crebains, that sort of thing. Like you were getting Rally at the Hornburg 7th pick because people didn't realize it was a premium common. That's less happening now, and you're in a spot where you have to kind of work for your good decks a little more, but that's fine. Part of the fun of Magic is doing that. That's what we're here for, right? So there's a couple of ways to adjust, and I kind of want to talk about them because, things have gotten a little bit more challenging. So one way to adjust here is draft blue and white. No, I don't mean draft white blue. I mean learn how to draft blue and white as pairs with red and black. That was already something that was useful. Sometimes you would end up doing that no matter what. Mm-hmm. But knowing how to draft blue black and blue red, knowing how to draft white black and white red, that'll help because, as I'm going to explain here, you still should be drafting red and black a lot, but you're more often going to have to lean on those, and especially blue I found myself drafting, because blue actually can be a main color. You can be a deck that has, 15 blue cards and 7 black cards or 8 black cards, maybe a red card or 2, because I often splash out Pelargir Survivor and everyone's favorite Shire Terrace. You can end up in a spot where you are main blue, but you're playing some of the premium red and black cards. You're playing Dunlin Crebain, Claim the Precious. You're playing Smite the Deathless. You're playing these cards that you had to take in the first couple picks because black and red are both cut, but you still got them. There's still enough black and red cards. And also, look at the pack we just opened. Even if the 2 people to your right were your colors, you'd still be getting a 3rd pick Crebain or Flame of Anor or Shadow Summoning or Smite. Like someone's getting a 4th pick Smite the Deathless out of that pack.
Yeah.
And even if someone was red-blue in front of you and took the Flame of Anor over a Smite, you would still get a Smite, or vice versa. Sometimes you would be blue-red and you'd be getting a Smite or a Flame 4th pick, and that's also great. So knowing how to draft the support, these colors, white and blue, can help because you can't just rely on getting red and black. The other thing is red and black are really deep. Part of the reason they're strong is that it's not just they have the best commons, which they do, but they also have a deep roster, right? You're like, oh, I'll Claim the Precious and Dunlin Crebain are fantastic. Yeah, totally. But you still have plenty of other cards. Uruk-hai Berserker is good. Mordor Muster is good. Lash the Balrog is a serviceable card in the right deck. Like Torment of Golem is a fantastic card. I take that card very highly. And add all that together, and it means you can be drafting black. This is kind of like blue in March of the Machine, or actually black in March of the Machine. I can be sitting there drafting black with a black drafter to my right and then another one 2 seats to their right, and still end up with a deck that is worth drafting black for.
And it may not be your primary. You may not have, the bulk of your playables be in there.
You might not get 13 black cards, but you might get 8 black cards and 5 of them are premium.
And then this goes to you saying learn how to draft white and blue.
Yeah, and then white and blue will support it. The other thing is, imagine a scenario where black's kind of cut. Where I first picked a black card. Let's say Gandalf was in the pack and we decided to first pick Dunlin Crebain out of that pack. And then the person to our right made a similar pick, but we got past like a Golem's Bite or a Torment of Golem, something kind of in the upper end of the black commons, but maybe not the best one. And then we took like a blue card, 3rd and 4th, and then 5th pick there was a Mordor Muster, and then we got no more black cards. Okay, well we'd conclude black's probably pretty cut. At the end of pack 1, I have like 3 good black cards and maybe 1 mediocre one. But who is the person to our left going to be drafting black in that scenario? Like, they're probably not, right?
Right.
And then that means pack 2, the person to your left's probably not drafting black. The person to their left might still be, because again, black is that deep.
Yeah.
But if you let's say the 2 people to your left aren't drafting black, which is a pretty realistic thing, pack 2 is going to be pretty good. You're going to get 5 or 6 black cards. And then you go into pack 3, you're not going to get much black, but you're going to end up with those 8 or 9 good black cards, maybe 10. And you can fill out the rest with the other colors and still end up in a fine spot. It's key to know that you should adjust here. You shouldn't just assume you're going to get all the cards you want, right? Like, which you kind of used to. The first week of the new format is kind of like that. Like, I remember the first week of Innistrad Midnight Hunt. Do you remember on stream I drafted blue-black like 7 times in a row?
It was more than 7. Yeah. It was
just ridiculous.
Completely nuts.
I hit number 1 mythic by only drafting blue-black, probably drafted 25 times and 20 were blue-black. And that's because people just hadn't quite gotten the memo yet. And then it became harder to. But that also doesn't mean that you should never draft it, and you got to fight for it. Don't just get pushed off it. Red is similar. Red is shallower, so it's a little less likely to end up in the same spot. But still, red is worth fighting for, and there's good red commons kind of all the way down the line. So you can still end up in either red or black. Another thing, you could consider drafting green. I'm still not saying that green is a color that I'm really that excited to draft. But drafting green is a reasonable thing to do when you get premium green uncommons 4th pick, when the other colors are pretty much full up and you can get like Enraged Huorn, Mirror Guardian. Those are the 2 green commons that tempt you, the 4/2 and the 4/5. Sometimes the fight spell can add up. Like green has high rarity cards that are good. You can end up in a spot where, green is a color that's okay to be in, even if it's also just using maybe some fixing to try to help play your other colors as well. So don't be completely closed off, because even though you shouldn't start green, and green is not a color that you should look to draft, that doesn't mean the correct number of green drafts is 0. And as we discussed last week, we're like, well, if you did 100 drafts, you should be green 5 times. After people have adjusted, maybe you should be green like 10% of the time now, or 15% of the time.
Right.
Probably closer to 10% than 15%.
And having an idea, like, because one of the things that can happen if you overcorrect, which you're saying don't do, right, is that you may have no idea how to draft what would even be a green deck. Even if you just got served on a platter a bunch of really, the decent green commons as they lie, but then, the good stuff from, say, let's say you're playing the Scry deck or something like that, where let's say you get a rare, you get a couple of really good uncommons. Like those cards do come together. You need to know what they do. You need to know how it works. Do you want to draft a multicolored deck? It's going to have to be green. Fixing's actually okay, right? If you want to do a 3 or 4 color, if you open one of those mythics or something that you want to try that, you're going to need to know how these green cards work and which ones to go for and that kind of stuff as well. So it's tough. You are going to end up being in red and or black a lot, if not most of the time. And you have to accept that. So
I really think the main thing is just don't overcorrect here, because this is what a lot of the mid to high level drafters, I think, are predisposed to do. It's kind of like the curse of knowledge, right? Where when you don't know how to play around anything, your win percentage is X. And then when you learn how to play around something, it actually dips. And then it goes back up once you do it correctly. But
yes.
But don't look at this and be like, wow, black's getting cut, I should avoid black. You should still not avoid black. Just be aware that when it's cut, you have to adjust a little bit. And that can mean drafting a color is cut. There was actually one Pro Tour many, many years ago, Pro Tour Champions, Betrayers, Saviors of Kamigawa, right? This is actually one of the third Pro Tour I ever played. One of the Dutch teams, their strategy, because white was the best color, especially in Pack 2, was to completely draft white even if the person to the right was cutting white, because they knew in Pack 2 they'd get all the good white. So they were going to force white no matter what. Even if the person to the right was drafting white, they would reap the reward. So Pack 1, they would just take a bunch of black cards, assuming they saw no white cards. And then Pack 2, they would just take all the white cards that the person to their right set up.
That's funny.
And you can do that here. You can take all these black and red cards in Pack 2, even if the person to your right is cutting them off. The colors are that strong. I think green with nobody to your 3 seats to your right drafting it is probably weaker than black with one of those 3 people drafting it.
Right. And how many times have you seen it at the Pro Tour on a constructed deck? Right, where there was a really good constructed deck and everybody's but everybody's going to be playing it, so we're going to go all these different directions, and then it just puts 5 people in the top 8 and everybody goes, why didn't I just play it?
And that's exactly what we're talking about here.
Exactly. Okay, do you want to talk some power plays here?
Oh, let's get to some power plays. This is a complex format in terms of gameplay.
It actually is, yeah.
And I think that's pretty cool. I really, this format's really, really delivering for me. So let's talk about some individual plays here, individual cards, unique interactions, and also a little bit of general stuff to start out with, in terms of themes. I want to talk a little bit more about the ring, because getting tempted by the ring is one of the keys to the format. As we mentioned last week, the 2 levels you really want to pay attention to are second and fourth, with second, I think, being overall the most important, because once you start looting, then the game just gets easy from there, right? You're looting, you're able to smooth out your draws, not draw too many lands, end up in a position where it finds you more ways to tempt if that creature dies, and more ways to get to level 4, in which case you start killing them very quickly.
Yeah. So you can feel the game slipping away when when their opponent has a looter going every single turn and you don't.
Right. And so one of the things is the first time I get tempted, I don't care too much if I have a ring bearer. What that means is I'll cast Birthday Escape on turn 1. I'll, play, claim the Precious without a creature in play.
Yeah.
The second ring level, when I'm getting tempted for the second time, I'll try pretty hard to have a creature in play, because at that point I really do care about having some kind of action.
Especially if you can attack with it immediately.
especially if you can attack with it immediately. And as always, you should probably put it on your smallest creature. Generally, that's a good kind of rule of thumb.
Oh, I solved that problem. I just put it on my Dunlin Crabane every time. So
well, that's actually Dunlin Crabane.
You don't leave home without it.
Rohirrim Lancer are the two best ring bearers.
Oh yeah, I mean, you thought it was Frodo.
yeah, but it just turns out that a 1/1 menace and a 1/1 flyer are impossible to block once they've been tempted by.
They are. So yeah, it was a crow and a random dude.
Yeah. So if they block and then you use an instant speed effect like Dreadful as the Storm to give your creature the third level of the ring bearer, it won't do anything.
Right.
That one specifically is worded, I think, for this reason, to trigger only at level upon blocks when you're at level 3, because I think it would just be way too obnoxious if you could always threaten. You blocked. Okay, instant speed. I'll give it the ring and kill your creature. End of combat.
Right.
But level 4 does work. Level 4 just says when I deal damage. So, Soothing of Smeagol, Dreadful as the Storm, instant speed ways like that can mean that sometimes you just make an attack and whatever they don't block, you just make the ring bearer to get an extra 3 in to have lethal.
Yeah, this is the one where you get attacked and you feel like you're doing fine, and you look away from your computer for a second and you look back and it says defeat and you go, wait, what? And you return to battlefield and you go, oh, okay, cool.
I honestly don't know how many draft videos I have where the last play of the draft is me realizing I'm about to get hit for an extra 3 via trample or whatever because of the ring bearer. So definitely something to be aware of. Moving on to some individual card strategy. Glorious Gale, the counter a creature and then get tempted if it's legendary, and Stern Scolding, counter a creature that has power or toughness 2 or less. Those are both heavily played. Blue decks just aren't cutting these cards. They're premium. Mm-hmm. And especially Glorious Gale, you can kind of predict when your opponent has it. Because when they leave 2 mana up on turn 2, maybe. When they leave 2 mana up on turn 3 or turn 4, that's a pretty strong signal. Most decks have a card to play on turns 3 or 4 that costs 3 or 4 mana. So if I see my opponent leaving up, a blue and 1, anytime in the first 4 or 5 turns, I'm thinking about these cards. And that doesn't mean you can always do something. Look, if your curve is just I've got 4 creatures in hand, what are you going to do? Not play a creature? You generally just have to play something. You can't just completely not play something. But if you have other options that aren't just tap out for your biggest creature, sometimes you really do want to exercise them. Torment of Golem, of course, is the best ever at this. That's why that card. Part of the reason why that card is so good is it just completely goes over the top of another common play here. But even playing something like Inherited Envelope or playing something like Arwen's Gift or any of the card draw spells or playing a Saga, when your opponent leaves up 2 mana and you play Book of Mazarbul, the double amass Saga, it's such a beating because some amount of the time they have Glorious Gale in their hand.
Definitely. And
they just get completely destroyed. Of course, Saruman's Trickery is part of the reason that card is so good and has such a high win percentage, is counters anything. So if they leave blue 1 up, I'm a little bit less prone to worry about it, and I'm just going to cast whatever I think is best because you can't play around that card.
Yeah, the best is Arwen's Gift.
Yeah.
If they have Glorious Gale and you play Arwen's Gift, you can just feel their shoulders.
That's the second best. That's the second best.
What's the best?
Torment of Golem. You get to see the Glorious Gale. You get to see the Gale, not take it, and then not play into it.
And still develop your board so you get a creature anyway. That's true. Yeah, that's
and close. Take their best next play. They thought they were going to go Glorious Gale into playing their 4-drop. Instead, you take their 4-drop. They didn't get to play Gale. Now next turn, if they leave Gale up, you're not going to play into it.
Incredible.
If they don't leave Gale up, you're going to drop your 4 or 5 drop, and they're going to look at the Glorious Gale in their hand and just, I can't, say enough good things about Torment.
It is so painful. That's true. All right, that's number 1 slot.
When it comes to land cyclers, so there's a couple of things. First of all, what should your land counts be? I typically am playing 15 or 16 land if I have enough land cyclers, which is to say, I usually end up with 18 or 19 lands total when you combine the two.
I see.
Because 16 lands plus 3 land cyclers, I think, is my preferred ratio, because they're at 19 mana sources. You don't really get mana screwed very often because 19, it gives you an extra buffer, right? When the average deck across all limited plays 17, you get an extra 2 lands. But it also isn't so low that you have to always cycle your Troll of Khazad-dûm or your Lorien Revealed. One of the common mistakes people make with this kind of stuff is I'll play 15 land and 2 land cyclers, so I still have 17 land. Well, it's like, yeah, but then you're not getting as much value out of the land cyclers. The whole point of the land cyclers is to make it so you don't flood and don't screw, and having 19 is a lot more likely to have that happen.
Right.
The other thing is, when do you use them? Look at your curve. If your curve is like completely laid out, yeah, just cycle it turn 1. If you're not sure, probably cycle it. It's a lot worse to have not cycled it when you were supposed to, and you have to play off curve, than to cycle it and draw too many lands. But if there's an opportunity, when you look at your hand, let's say your hand has 3 lands, 2 2-drops, a land cycler, and like a 5-drop.
Yeah.
You're like, well, should I cycle this turn 1? Actually, in that spot, you might not want to, because you can go 2-drop turn 2. Turn 3, you can play 2-drop and then cycle it if you've not drawn lands. But if you've drawn 2 lands in a row there, and now you have 5 lands and a 5-drop and a land cycler, you probably don't want to cycle it, because you really don't want to draw 7 or 8 lands.
No way. I'm planning on flooding out. So
yeah, but if your opening hand is 3 lands, a 2-drop, a Torment of Golem, and a 5-drop, yes, of course you have to cycle it on turn 1.
You just have to do it. Yeah.
Another thing that's kind of going on in this format is there's a lot of X1s and a lot of ways to punish X1s. So the Black Breath and Cast into the Fire are cards I almost always main deck at this point, like 1 copy.
I've seen a lot more Cast into the Fire than in the prior days. Yeah.
Well, it's nice because they both trade nicely for Rally at the Hornburg, which is a premium common. There's a lot of X1s just because of the ring bearing stuff.
Yep.
And these cards also give you a little bonus, like Exile and Artifact is nice against random Horn of Gondor or any of the other rare artifacts. And then getting tempted by Black Breath is pretty cool too. So you should definitely be aware that these cards are playable and you should put 1 in. Also, Fear Fire Foes, the red X. I mean that card's a bomb.
Filthy.
But what I mean is, like, you're going to play against a decent amount of sweepers, more than the average format. So when you are playing, try not to play the 3rd 1 toughness creature if you don't have to. Okay. Obviously, I'm not saying operate under the assumption they always have these cards, but just be aware that your opponent's more likely to have a sweeper in this format than most. So maybe if you played a 1 toughness creature the first couple turns, don't play a 3rd one on turn 5. Also, this is part of the reason that Westfold Rider, the 2-mana 3/1, is a little weaker than it might look.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's good to know. Yeah, I've definitely been seeing more of Cast into the Fire, and then Fear Fire Foes is always just disgusting.
There's 2 cards that white decks have that you should be aware of when they make a kind of weird attack. It's Denethor, which we opened in one of the Cracker Packs, the 2/4, that says at the end of your turn, if one of your creatures died, you make a 1/1. And Faramir, the uncommon white one, that says, same thing except you draw a card. Also, there's even Smeagol, the black-green 4/2. So there's 3 different creatures that have, if one of your creatures died end of turn, do a cool thing. So if your opponent attacks and you're like not sure why they made that attack, think about whether they could have that. Like, for example, they attack with Westfold Rider into your 1/1 token.
Right.
And you're like, oh, obviously I'll take this trade. And in this case, yeah, you probably are going to take the trade a good amount of the time. But you just have to be aware that if you're not sure and it doesn't make that much sense, that's like a very strong reason for them to make those attacks. Another good example, right? They attack like a 2/1 into your Easterling Vanguard that when it dies amasses 1.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to be aware that they're just looking to set up one of these things, and sometimes you just should just take the damage.
Yeah.
It's even more obvious when they attack their 1/1 token into your 2/2.
Yes. I mean, your brain usually goes to like combat tricks there, right? You're like, oh, but like you said, if they're attacking a 3/1 into your 1/1, they're not trying to burn a combat trick to get rid of your 1/1 token. Like,
because that's typically limited what would happen there.
Right.
But this format just happens to have 3 different cards that just say, oh, at the end of your turn, did something die? Do something cool. And speaking of attacks, blue is really good at ambushing. At common, they have Deceive the Messenger and Greyhaven's Navigator. That's the 3/2 flash scry one. Greyhaven's Navigator is a little less played than Deceive, which is getting heavily played. And at uncommon, they have Gandalf, the 2/4. So blue is the color you least want to like kind of randomly attack into with your high value creature. You really should just be aware that like your blue opponents are often going to have good ambush stuff. So should you attack with your Flamesmith, your 2/1 that pings whenever you cast a spell into your blue opponent? No, you should probably not. A lot of the times you really just aren't going to want to do that.
Yeah, especially if it's part of your primary game plan. Like if you made a Flamesmith deck where those need to be on the battlefield for the future turns, you do not want to get deceived the messenger and lose your guy for basically nothing.
So here's an arena specific thing.
Yeah.
If your opening hand has deceived the messenger, you probably shouldn't play an island on turn 1. Because here's how it looks from the opponent's point of view. You play an island, you auto pass, right? If you don't have a land cycler. They, play their second land, they play a creature, it instantly resolves, now you're getting priority. That just tells your opponent you have deceived the messenger.
That's like the only card, right?
For one mana. It's the only card for 1 blue mana that can happen that way. So if you don't have a land cycler in hand to help conceal it, that's just telling your opponent you have deceived, and you want to deceive them. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind.
A lot less deception going on if you have that stop. We mentioned briefly the Shadowfax thing. It does check power, so you can get away with some big ones like the 6 mana 3/3 bird. There's others too, but it does seem like it would check for mana value, but it doesn't. So keep that in mind.
When you're working with Deceive, it's got a lot of stuff going on. You could practically just do a show about Deceive the Messenger by itself.
You're gonna write a book?
The Gush book version 2. I've mentioned this before. You can deceive your own creature when they attack with a ring bearer, so that your creature's small enough to block. Though, of course, factor in that you're going to amass, so you have to. This kind of gives your army -2/+1.
Yeah, if it was the army you wanted to block with, it does get a little weird, but it still might work.
Yeah, and then you can also. I've never had this happen. You could shrink your own creature if it's a ring bearer to get by their blocker. Like if you had a 4/4 ring bearer and they had a 4/4, you could actually shrink your own creature in order to attack them, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, I've considered this. It's just hard because it usually means that your creature doesn't hit the
deal damage. Yeah. It's gonna have to have a very, very, very narrow set of circumstances. Also, it can save your creature from Battle by Water, the destroy all creatures power 3 or greater card, which is funny. I have had that come up, and the other interaction on the other side is build a pony, which sacks a food to make a creature deal damage equal to its toughness instead of power.
Yep.
Deceive the Messenger does not function.
No, I found that out.
Against build a pony,
The bad way. Yeah, that was bad.
Yeah, it's not great. So
what is this?
I love Deceive, but it's got some stuff going on.
It's really good, yeah, and it has all these cool little things that make you feel clever, which of course is why we're all here. Well, what is this next one, though? The Bath Song goes infinite with Rise of the Witch King.
So Rise of the Witch King is the 2 green-black sorcery. Each player sacks a creature, and then if you sacrificed a creature this way, return another permanent, not creature, from your graveyard to play. I had a deck where I was able to loop the Bath Song with Rise of the Witch King by getting it back with Rise, and just being able to shuffle back in the Rise once with the Bath Song once I got it back. It was really fun.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah,
that's a very Louis Scott-Vargas move too.
It's not going to come up very often, but it is definitely something that can happen.
Yeah,
and more specifically than just, does this work with the Bath Song? Just keep in mind that Rise can get back your Sagas. Like they're permanents that do cool things, and that can work out pretty nicely.
Yeah, a card that comes up infrequently, but every once in a while is Wizard's Rockets. It doesn't have like a natural home in the set, but you do see it around every once in a while. And for people that are splashing or trying to do something a little bit more ambitious, it's a fairly low impact way to try to enable those things. But the 2 things to mention about it is that you can sacrifice it for 0. There's often not a reason to do so, but you can just say, I just want to get my card out of this.
The main reason is it's the start of your turn. You have all the mana you need. You don't need any fixing. You're playing Grixis and you have 2 of each land out. Sacking it for 0 lets you see what your options are without having to tap any mana.
Right.
Like without having to commit mana to it.
To commit to a color. Right.
Yeah.
Because you get the mana back, so it's kind of, but whatever. So anyway, you can do that. And then also it's worth noting that the card drop part triggers when Wizard's Rockets goes to the graveyard, not when you activate it. So if it goes to the graveyard for any reason, that will work. So, Improvised Club is a really good thing to sacrifice to it, because oftentimes you're sacrificing a creature to the club.
if you think about it, a wizard rocket would be an extremely good improvised club. You pick that thing up and just hurl it at the opponent. Like that seems very on brand.
It really would be, yeah. So there you go. So keep that in mind if you have improvised club, especially if you end up, I had a deck that had 3 improvised club, which is, it's powerful, but it is starting to encroach on your ability to keep creatures on the battlefield at some point. And I just put a couple of those Wizards Rockets in my deck, and it worked out fine. It was just like I would just use turn 1 to play Wizards Rockets. If I didn't have club, I could just sack it, get my card back the next turn, and just continue. And if I did, I would just save it and then sort of take over the game later when I figured out whether the club was going to the head or using it to control the board. So that's a nice little trigger, a nice little interaction there. Another one that comes up, I've seen people do this multiple times, and I think it's just reflexive, but it's important to wait until an amass trigger resolves before killing the orc army. I've just had people, I think that our brains are sort of trained to feel like we're putting +1/+1 counters on a creature, and if I just kill the creature, then they don't get the +1/+1 counters if there's like an amass trigger on the stack. But of course, that's not the case. If you kill the army, then it just starts a new army underneath. So make sure you just take that second. I've just seen it a few too many times where people just go, I play something that has a mass, and then they go, boom, kill your mass army. And then I'm like, that's not going to work quite how you wanted. Like, it's not like a complete blank. They still did take away whatever counters, but if they just would have said resolves, now kill your orc army, there wouldn't have been anything left.
Yeah, just know what you're trying to do. Sometimes you do want to do it. Let's say they have a 3/3 army out and they cast Dunland Crebain. Sometimes you just want to smite the Deathless in response because you can't deal with a 5/5 and you can block a 2/2 with your 2/3. But if you have Isolation at Orthonk, the put a creature second from the top that just kills armies, yeah, of course you just let it resolve and then just Isolation the big army. So just be aware that that's how that's going to work, and don't reflexively do the thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think we're just kind of trained, for that. Dreadful as a Storm.
Yeah, we chatted a bit about it already. My main points are A, that it's better than you think, and B, that when you use it on an unblocked creature to get to the 4th level, it just does a ton of extra damage.
It's also
straight +5/+5 on an orc army because those are a 0/0 base.
Right.
So you end up with like a ludicrously sized orc when that sort of thing happens.
One of the cards that I like, but maybe isn't quite as good as how much I like it, is Mordor Trebuchet, which is the 1/4 defender that makes a 2/1 kind of, what is it, like a goblin being thrown across?
It's a catapult. Like an orc
thing. Yeah.
That whole thing is really funny.
It's pretty cool. But at any rate, it is actually a creature that it makes. It's a token creature, and it gets sacrificed at the end of combat. And there's a few smaller interactions that happen with that. One of them is that since it is a creature and it is being sacrificed and it is a token, it will trigger things like Mirkwood Bats, which cares about whenever you sacrifice a token, it triggers. That does actually trigger it. It doesn't get just straight up exiled. It sacrifices it, and it is a token. But also, you can put a stop before it gets exiled or with trigger on the stack and sacrifice it as a creature to whatever. So Grima, Kirith Ungol Patrol, Club, something like that. If you want to use it, just make sure that you either put a stop or verbalize it if you're playing in real life or whatever. But, that is, even though it's a short window that 2/1 flying thing is on the battlefield, it is a creature, it is a token, it does get sacrificed, and you can sacrifice it to other effects as well. So that's kind of the thing that you need to make Mordor Trebuchet actually kind of good, is you need to have something to do with the tokens when you do get them, because some percentage of the time you don't have an orc army or a goblin or whatever it is that triggers it, and you just don't get to do anything with it. So make sure that when the sun is shining, you're making some hay with the Trebuchet.
Yeah, I've come down on the card. I found it to be a little too situational for my liking.
It's not very good. That's the problem with it.
So March from the Black Gate is a cool one, because what it lets you do is whenever you attack, it amasses 1, right? When you attack with an army.
Yeah.
But what that means is you actually have a combo where you can attack with your 1/1 army token.
Yeah.
And you have to have full control on Arena to do this, or just, in Paper Magic, you just say what you're doing. And then you sack that token in response.
Oh.
And then like to a Nasty End or Improvised Club. And then when the ability resolves, you'll make a new army. You'll amass 1.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's a really neat interaction. So it doesn't come up a ton, but we're talking. What are good interactions here? And March from the Black Gate giving you a bonus army when you're using a sacrifice effect, it definitely qualifies.
Well, and that seems really good for like Grima and Kirithungel Patrol, because there are times when you don't have a big army rolling and that first attack just runs it into something anyway, right? So you're just basically like, if you were to attack with your 1/1 Orc army, it just would have died. Now you actually have something you can repeatedly do with it.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
It's a cool way to do
with
something.
Commons too. Like that's, like, yeah. Okay. That's great.
Foray of Orcs is a weird one. So this is the 3 in a red sorcery, amass Orcs 2, and then when you do, you choose a creature and your army deals X damage or X is its power. So basically your army, you give your army +2/+2, and then it shoots something. Mm-hmm. So killing the token in response to the trigger will not save your creature, right? If they play a Foray of Orcs, you let it resolve, then they target your creature, you have an opportunity window to respond. If you use something like a Smite the Deathless to kill their 3/3, your creature will still take 3. It'll use last known information.
Okay.
However, if you use everyone's favorite Deceive the Messenger, that will stop it because it will check the power at -3, -0. That's probably not going to kill your thing. Note that this was bugged on Arena for some amount of time. It may still be. I'm not even 100% sure. So you do have to keep that in mind where it. I had that exact interaction come up where I played this, they cast Isolation at Orthonk, and then it didn't deal any damage. That's actually incorrect. I assume they'll probably fix that if they haven't already.
Okay.
Also, there's a really strange interaction with King of the Oathbreakers. That's the spirit that says whenever one of your spirits becomes the target of a spell, phase it out. Mm-hmm. Foray of Orcs will not trigger that ability because it's not a spell targeting it, it's a trigger targeting it.
Oh.
It's just a weird rulesy thing, but if they have a King of the Oathbreakers out and you can make a 3/3 army, you can just kill their king, and it's pretty good.
Wow. That's one of the only ways to actually get rid of that stupid card.
Yeah, it's very strange that's how it works. But that is
because of the delayed trigger, it's not the trigger from casting it or something.
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
And then, first of all, if you have Orcish Bowmasters, you're probably going to win. But second, if you give it Death Touch with something like Shelob's Ambush, you can really do some gunning down. Like you have to again hold priority in order to do these most of the time, but it works out really nicely. And speaking of Shelob's Ambush, casting it in response to like a fight spell can be really good. Like they use Fury of the Ents to kill your thing, and you're like ambush now. Maybe my thing survives, even if it doesn't. You still trade off really well.
Okay. What about Isildur's Fateful Strike?
So that's the legendary spell that you have to have a legend, of course, to play it. Mm-hmm. That one works really nicely if you cast it during their draw step when they draw up to 5 or more cards in hand. You can end up getting to take their cards out before they have a chance to play them.
Because it is an instant, right? And it brings them down to 4 cards. We've touched on this a little bit, but cards like Moria Marauder, that's the red 1/1 double striker, or Theoden, the 2/3 that gives double strike whenever it or another human ETBs, are just plain disgusting with ring level 4. Like, yeah. Especially if you can surprise that in or whatever, but it does trigger multiple times every single time that thing hits. It is difficult to set those up, to be fair, but when you do, and I have been on the bad end of this, I mean, your life total absolutely plummets. It is gross.
Yeah, really good. And Moria Marauder especially is just good with it to begin with. Mm-hmm. So this is something that comes up when you're playing against blue-red. Gandalf Sanction, it deals 1 damage, deals X is the number of spells in your graveyard to a creature, and then the excess damage goes to the player. If you're playing against a blue-red opponent and they have 7 spells in their graveyard and you're at 6, if you play a 1 toughness creature, now you can die to Gandalf Sanction where you couldn't before.
Oh, good call.
So something that could come up is if you have a 4/4 in play and they're a turn or 2 away from dying, you may not want to play a creature, force them to sanction your 4/4 and not quite kill you, and then play your creature. Also, you can save a removal spell or a sacrifice spell because that'll stop it. If they go sanction and in response you smite the Deathless and kill your own creature, you won't take any damage because the spell fizzles. And that's also, if you're the one with Gandalf Sanction, a reason not to always kill their smallest thing. If they're at 9 and you have 15 spells in your graveyard, target their 6/6 or something. Mm-hmm. So, or ideally actually target their 4/4 so they can't smite it to death, but also a 2 toughness trick won't save them. But you just want to try to play around the cards as best you can. And the most common interaction would be Smite the Deathless for sure.
Yeah, and especially that first example you gave about just like randomly running out your 1/1s near the end of the game there when you're not really going to die from anything else. That's that's like an unforced error, right? Like that feels like why not? And then you get shown why not. And all of a sudden it's less good. One small interaction that I found was with Eastmark Cavalier, which is the 1 and a white 2/2 with vigilance that kills orcs or goblins, is that it does actually say deals damage to a goblin or orc, where sometimes these things are templated as blocks or becomes blocked by this thing, then it kills it on the other side. So as you can see, Luis and I have been playing a lot of Deceive the Messenger, but this is another one where you actually can negate that ability. And because they'll often just throw this in front of your 4/4, 5/5 orc army and just be like, sure, let's just get rid of that thing. And you can negate that effect if you can reduce its power as well. Where when I first saw it, I read it, then sort of put it aside and just assumed that it was templated like the others. So
Gandalf the Grey, that's the blue-red one, not the gray one. It has to go through all 4 spell modes. So that's deal 3 to your opponent, copy 1 of your spells, tap or untap permanent, or put Gandalf on top.
Mm-hmm.
The 4th spell you play, if you haven't chosen the mode yet, you're going to have to put Gandalf on top. It's actually not optional. So
that's right.
Just keep that in mind. Often you want to do that. Like one of the best plays with Gandalf tends to be play Gandalf with 6 mana, leaving let's say an island up for, let's say, a spell that costs a single blue,
just something,
whatever that could be. And so you can save Gandalf when they try to kill him, but don't be unpleasantly surprised by casting your Arwen's Gift and then all of a sudden your Gandalf's on top of your deck. Like, oh, I was counting on that.
Exactly.
Looping Samwise the Stout-Hearted will give you ring levels. So that's the 2/1 flash that brings a creature back that died, or permanent back that died this turn. So you like have a Samwise in play. End of their turn, you just play a second, choose to keep the second one, or it doesn't actually matter which one you keep. The trigger will return the Samwise to your hand, and so you basically just paid 2 mana for a +1 ring level, and you get to choose a new ring bearer. So that's pretty sweet.
One card I've tried a bit and haven't really been very impressed by, but I don't know, it's snuck in a few times, is Ring Sight, which is the gold, one of the gold uncommons. It's the 1 blue black. It says it's a sorcery. It says ring tempts you. Search your library for a card that shares a color with a legendary creature you control. Reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shuffle. The thing that I wanted to point out about it is it shares a color with a legendary creature you control. When you play it and you pick your ring bearer, it feels like you're saying, I want to get a card the color of the thing that I just put the ring on, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. It can be any legend you have. So just keep that in mind. I had that pop up where I picked a black creature to be the ring bearer, but I also had a blue legend on the battlefield. And so it just let me pick, from basically any of my cards. But I was like, wait, why? I picked this black card and okay, I got it. It's any of my legends, even though, like I said, when you resolve it, it doesn't really feel that way.
Yeah, that's a cool interaction though. I have not had the best results with that card.
Yeah, me neither.
It's just a little bit too much going on at once that you need to have happen.
It is.
Here's the best card I've combined with it. You might want to be interested in this one. The card Oak Orcish Bowmasters is a very good combination with Ring Sight.
I'll look into that.
Here's another weird rare. Shagrat Loot Bearer. That's the black-red 4/4 for 4. Says whenever it attacks you, amass X or X the number of equipment on Shagrat. Well, if you have 0 equipment, which is the most likely scenario, it will amass 0, which means if you have like a Mirkwood Bats out, it actually will ping your opponent.
Oh, really? It does make a thing. Interesting. Yeah. Of course, there is no window for you to sacrifice it, right?
No, but also if you had I guess it wouldn't work with Mahur because you're not putting any counters on the creature.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't think it's putting
0
counters.
Is not a number of counters, right? That is exactly what not putting counters on something is putting 0 of them. That's a cool one.
Yeah, I think so.
One that we talked about when we reviewed the card, but that is worth repeating here is Faramir, Prince of Ithilien. That's the 2 blue-white rare. It triggers on your end step, and the trigger is if your opponent attacked you next turn, at the beginning of their end step, you get 3 1/1s, and if they didn't, you draw a card. But the really great part, this card is really awesome, but one of the really awesome things about it is that you play it, say go. If they don't kill it before your end step, that trigger goes on the stack. That's kind of a reminder for their next turn. And then it doesn't matter what happens to Faramir. They can untap, kill him, attack you, and you're going to get your 3/1/1s. And if they don't, you're going to get your card, even if Faramir's off the battlefield. So always keep that in mind, because I especially think that for paper, it will be really easy to forget that, because your Faramir's gone and they just say go, and you're like, cool, draw my card. And you're like, wait a minute, I was supposed to get 3/1/1s. And, intuitively, it feels like Faramir would still have to be on the battlefield for that to happen, but that's not the case.
Yeah.
Card's amazing, by the way. Definitely a good reason to go in. Any others that you want to hit up before we take off here, Luis?
I think that's about it. I mean, there's a lot of cool interactions in the set for sure. Part of the reason the set is something that I've really been enjoying is the gameplay just is really good. There's a lot of good, interesting gameplay.
Definitely. It's carrying it right now, too.
Yeah, having the games themselves be interesting is a big part of it. And that makes up for the fact that, one of the colors is a lot weaker in draft, which is not a death knell for the format.
No. And that's definitely true. Okay. Well, if you have any cool combos or little wrinkles that we didn't cover, you can find us on social media, Marshall_LR and Luis's LSV, and tell us which ones you found. Maybe if we find some cool ones, we'll mention at the beginning of the show next week. Just, there's always a ton of them, and so we're bound to miss a couple. So if they're already, let us know. If you want to find everything related to the show, you can head over to lrcast.com, where you can find links to all of our different endeavors, including Luis's new YouTube channel. You're almost at 20K, buddy.
Yeah, I've been really enjoying it.
It's popping off over there.
It's been a lot of fun, and people seem to be enjoying the videos, so I'll keep making them. Yeah,
my favorite thing that Luis does on there he does team drafts. I mean, they're money drafts. He does team drafts with some of the degenerate Pro Tour players, and they will do vintage cube draft where they drafted on, what is it called now?
We use Draftmancer as the app.
Draftmancer. Is that what we use on the thing too? On the show?
Yeah, it's just effectively the same thing. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So on Draftmancer, where they have a version of the Magic Online Cube, and then they build the decks using their accounts, and then they'll play. So you get a little bit of that vintage cube fix, even when the vintage cube isn't up, by watching Luis play his team drafts on there. That's to me, that's my favorite, Luis. I've really, really enjoyed watching those going. So you can check those out. Again, there's a link on the front page of LRcast for Luis's YouTube channel. Make sure you get subscribed over there to get him over that 20K mark, though. I don't think it'll be long before that happens anyway. If you want to support the show, as I mentioned, it's patreon.com/limited resources. That's going to do it for this one. We'll see you next week.
All right. So I've got an arena deck, which I mentioned to you, which I haven't gotten to play out yet. And It's got a really flavorful thing. I've got, the One Ring itself, and I have the volcano, Mordor or whatever, the land that taps for black or red, and you can sack it.
So the full flavor.
Mount Doom, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was thinking, okay, so obviously, sacking the ring to Mount Doom is of course in saving your two creatures, which are, I guess, nominally Sam and Frodo, is one of the best flavor moments, and they designed with that in mind. What are some of the other biggest flavor hits for this? It would be Eowyn killing the Witch King, or Smite the Deathless killing the Witch King. Either one of those, I think plays.
Okay.
Boromir himself is of course really flavorful, where he sacrifices to give your team indestructible and tempts you, which is exactly what happened in the book. But even better if he does that to save the hobbits. Right. So you'll want to have Frodo and Sam out. I think I don't remember exactly which hobbits he saved, if not all of them. Maybe
I think it was all four of the main ones. Yeah.
Because I think that's where the Fellowship got broken apart. But
it was right after that.
Yeah. Of course, Isolation at Orthanc targeting Gandalf is a very good one. You gotta do that. I like the idea of Bilbo attacking past Smaug for lethal, because Bilbo hid from Smaug.
Oh yeah,
that wasn't in the Lord of the Rings book. That was in The Hobbit. But also, speaking of hot takes, I think The Hobbit is a better book than Lord of the Rings. I think by a lot.
Dropping bombs. Okay.
I love The Hobbit, and I think Lord of the Rings is okay.
Okay.
So you've got those.
I got a couple more in mind. In fact, I've
Oh, yeah.
seen you do one.
Oh, what's that?
It was like day one, and you cast the Fool of a Took on.
Oh, stern scolding on Pippin.
Yeah. I was like, that's just too good. And
That's
like,
right, when
once
he
you did
drops
that, I was like, okay, I get it. I see why they lean so hard into this. Like, this is funny.
No, they did a great job.
They did.
I had, I'm not trying to criticize, and there's some things about this set that I think could have been done better or whatever. Don't look up the Saruman of Many Colors card. I don't acknowledge that one as a card. I'll have you know, by the way, I've had 4 different people try to tell me what the card does. Like, here's this card you haven't seen before. What is this doing? None of them got it right, including like multiple people who've like top 8 Pro Tours, been playing Magic for 20 years. You just read the card and you're like, I don't know what that does.
Yeah.
You didn't even try on the set.
No,
You're
I
just
gave up. I gave up.
But,
yeah, I know my limitations.
But the flavor has been a hit, and it's been really, really good. You've got a lot of like bucket lists. I think I'm going to have to go through and make a list of all the like, what are the best flavor moments, and have I done this yet? Because casting Stern Scolding on Pippin definitely, is a very good one.
Amazing.
I'm hoping this deck.
Is there something I can do with Balrog? Remember, it has when it dies, destroy target artifact or
dying,
creature.
killing Gandalf when it dies.
But didn't Gandalf end up winning that fight?
Well, kind of.
Didn't he smote it upon the mountainside?
So at that time, both Gandalf beat the Balrog, banished it to the depths. And then remember, the whip comes up and grabs Gandalf. Yeah. So Balrog's lash is even better for that. But then Gandalf, of course, comes back later. So it's not
so it's it's
not the end of the world,
But they had a big, remember the whip came up, and then didn't he fight it for like a couple months or a week on I think
that was we were told later, right? At the time at the time you didn't know.
Everybody's crying. Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably got to be something with Bill the Pony. I guess Gimli and Legolas racking up some kills. But honestly, that's actually one of my biggest disappointments is the scene at the Battle of Helm's Deep where Gimli and Legolas are racking up kills, right? The counter of kills thing is one of the coolest scenes. I remember, when a teenage me or whatever watching this was like, wow, this is awesome.
Yeah.
These cards are just like among the bottom of the barrel when it comes to designs in the set. Like
they kind of mailed it in a little, didn't they?
On those two specifically, I really just don't think they got there. So
I think so too. They're not bad, but
Legolas counter of kills is bad. That's the one that untaps when you scry once per turn, but has no other connection to scry.
Yeah,
that's not a design. Yeah. That's just you put text on a card. That's the equivalent of making plays without a goal, right? Like that's But I'm curious what other good book moments there are, because there are plenty, that I'm thinking of, and I would say that the flavor, where they could without sacrificing gameplay, because at the end of the day, people are meant to play with these cards. I think they did a very good job of having the cards be able to hit those flavorful moments. Like Smite killing the Witch King is perfect. You could look at those 2 cards individually and think cool cards. The interaction is exactly what happened and is awesome. But it's not like forced. It's not weird. Whereas the like Legolas counter of kills untapping when you scry, forced and weird and accomplishes nothing, Mm-hmm. So really good stuff overall. And I've been enjoying the set. I anticipate drafting more, and I bet I'll, inadvertently tick a lot of these things off of my bucket list here.